Hello and welcome to The Dive. We're up to episode 13 now. A very lucky number. This week, we're going to be going, what are we talking about?
We got patch, 713 on the way. And
Another lucky
we're gonna,
patch.
Yeah, update that one for solo queue. We got some tips.
We're going to talk about some global news. We got SKT, KT happened last night. And, of course, be talking about the NA LCS.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we have to talk about as well was a game that happened a few days ago. I don't know if you've heard of these teams. SKT and KT, they play in some Korean esports
Hey, what does that stand for? Why?
Yeah, I have no idea, actually. Anyway, two top teams pretty much in the world. Both had a good start to the split. And again, the first matchup was pretty hype. It went 3 games.
Yeah, it was actually nuts. And I mean, the result, pretty cool. SKT wins.
It was
but
actually nuts.
But it's the way in which they won that was so insane. And I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' opinion right off the bat. Just so people are kind of split. It seems like some people are saying, well, it's less impressive because it was like SKT barely won. Or is it more impressive because SKT was getting slammed in both the games and then still won? You know, like is that more impressive or less impressive than if they had just won a clean series?
I think it can be both, right? I think their aura of invincibility is improved by this when they're down in
Blanks
every game.
specifically.
And Blanks 19-0 now in games is even more insane. But this reminds me a lot of kind of the SKT from a couple years ago where they're actually getting a little bit run over in the early game and actually making some mistakes, but then they still triumph in the end. I think when you look at it from like a really high level perspective, you think, hey, there's actually a few vulnerabilities where you could actually take them down. But the feeling is that they're absolutely unstoppable because they were down, 15 kills to 3 in game 2, still came back. Then they were down another 4,000 gold in a Baron in game 3, still came back, and it felt like you just couldn't beat them.
Yeah, and it's cool for those two types of teams too, because for the whole year, I've always felt like they differentiate in that way where KT was always, drafting a bit more lane dominant, drafting a bit more early game, and it felt like they had decided that was the area where they can beat SKT. And SKT still, stay to their strengths. And that being said, as close as game number 2 was, you never are like, oh yeah, we got this.
Yeah.
And I mean, they were right to a point, right? Like the early games were going so well. Like if they are saying, hey, the early game is SKT's weakness, I guess they were right because they were able to get massively ahead. I think that they converted leads extremely well. Mm-hmm. I think that the way that they played around, Smeb top lane, getting him ahead and then doing these like 4 or 5 man plays on bot lane and stuff was like super, super great. It just felt like it almost felt a little bit random, like especially when Def kept getting caught out and stuff like that. It feels like these are games that they would close out. Almost like I don't know if it's just they're getting like Def is getting nervous or something, but like there was multiple times where he's walking forward and like warding doing a deep pink ward as the AD carry and stuff like that. Yeah. Like it seemed a bit strange, and maybe that is part of the aura of invincibility of SKT. It's like you get nervous against him because if you're in that position against any other team, you're like, this is a free win. We've already closed this game.
Yeah, we see this from almost every team that plays SKT. You have to get over the fact that you're playing against SKT and then still play your game, and I think a little bit of that happens. But also, in game 2, when SKT got aced at Baron, if Faker doesn't secure that with a shockwave because their jungler died, the series is over. It's 2-0. I'm not even talking about this. It was that close in some of these moments.
It always seems to be that, though.
I feel like KT should have won this one. I feel like this one is more in the bag than any of the others.
Yeah, the other ones, you're just like, okay, that was definitely...
Yeah. Oh, it was a close game.
I mean, the finals, they got slammed. Right?
Exactly.
Like last
that was not close.
Yeah. I do think that you guys touched on a really interesting thing, though. This topic of being scared against SKT or playing different against SKT, because I've actually had some conversations with just streamers online about using nameplates just in solo queue or not using nameplates in solo queue. And some people are like, oh yeah, I don't want to affect my gameplay. I've always been in the camp of I can utilize more information well. Like if I know who it is, then I can build like a psychological profile for this player. Like I know all of the players in low masters that will try and cheese me. Right. So having those ons and having those on adds information for me. It's an interesting case for KT because literally they think everybody else is garbage compared to them except for SKT. So that's literally the only team that you would want to like turn them off against. Yeah, that's the only team where you wouldn't want to have
being able to exploit tendencies works up until the point where you feel like their tendency is to be perfect and like always do the right thing.
You don't want to be intimidated. intimidated.
Exactly.
Well, and I think with sometimes it's like it can become an ego thing, right? Like it can be a mental block where you feel like you're better than the other people, but you keep losing, and it can be frustrating. You're like trying to prove yourself, you're trying to reach too far, things like this. Like this can happen in a lot of games. There's the whole talk of like in fighting games they call it your demon or whatever, things like this, where it's like this one guy that you always lose to, you can't seem to beat, whether you're considered to be better or not.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because when I was like going back and forth with the streamers, because I was arguing for all streamers to always have nameplates on.
Yeah.
'Cause I like seeing, who the characters are basically in the story. I brought up the example of I remember Doublelift when he was playing against RNG Mata at Worlds, and Mata was playing Alistar,
Oh,
and
yeah.
afterwards Doublelift gives this interview where he goes, "That guy is just so crazy. The only reason he dumpstered me was he's an insane
doing
person."
stupid stuff.
Yeah, he's like, this guy is
He's
just,
only a bad player would do.
he's an insane. Well, he didn't say bad player. He said crazy.
Kinda
He said
implies.
insane.
Yeah.
I think you guys are stretching. You guys are definitely making.
Doublelift literally called him awful.
Yeah.
No.
You're stretching a little bit, but basically his point was that Mata's making these crazy engages on Alistar that are like super risky. And I was like, well, it worked 5 times on you. And he like absolutely destroyed Doublelift and like kept engaging on him and like blew him up every time. That to me is a point where if you do have nameplates on, then Doublelift maybe doesn't treat Mata as any other person, and you're like well aware of how RNG play and how this player plays. Like there are benefits to having those nameplates on. I do definitely get the argument of you don't want to be intimidated and it's going to change your play style and stuff like that. But I think there are benefits if you can control it, basically the power.
And that's what it is. It's person to person, right? Because I'm in your camp as far as thinking, hey, you get more out of that if you know a player's tendencies. If you know that someone likes to be super aggressive, you can play more passively against them. Maybe they'll make a mistake and you can kill them. Or if they play super passively, maybe you can exploit that, right? But some players just have like a mental block, and for them it's not worth it because obviously someone can be way more affected by it.
Yeah.
Another thing I am kind of curious to hear you guys' opinion on is also Peanut. Right? Like everyone is hyped up on Blank. Everyone is hyped up on, even like, well, Untara didn't have like amazing games, but he got subbed in for Huni. He was kind of it felt like he was kind of just there, but they won with him and they stuck with him. And what's happening with Peanut? A lot of people are like, well, Peanut sucks in summer. He's not doing very well. It's all about Blank now. What do you guys think?
I don't think it's all about Blank.
Yeah, I think we're still going to see Peanut a fair bit. Even the fact not much has changed since MSI, and they brought Peanut and Hootie, and they played all of the games pretty much at MSI. I think didn't Blake play one game at some point during MSI, but the rest of
he
it
played it all.
He was their sub that they brought them.
Yeah,
I was trying to think.
They didn't
bring Untara, and that makes sense to
Blank.
me because to me the gap between like Blank and Peanut performances most recently and Untara and Huni, I feel like the Untara and Huni one is like much more meh than the
fact that it's
Blank
becoming a question though whether or not Blank or Peanut starts, I think is cool because Blank was the black sheep on the SKT team last year. Along with
I was his number one hater.
Yeah, I mean, he sucked for a lot of those games, and especially in pressure situations. And now I feel like they've given him a lot of reps, and this is probably one of the higher pressure situations I've seen him in. But even then, that's still not playoffs. That's still not the experience Peanut brings. So I think we're actually more likely to see them subbed out fairly frequently, even in important series now that he's doing so well.
Here's my thing with Blank and Blank's recent improvements, basically, is that you can see the change in his gameplay. So that, to me, validates everything that's going on. I still stand by he was absolutely garbage back when we were all criticizing him.
I don't know, absolutely
Okay. Compare for SKT standards.
Yeah, for SKT standards,
yeah.
I'll give you that.
I always need
a
to put
really good, nearly world class.
you always have to put that
for
that
a world
context.
champion.
All right,
This guy was
that's it.
trash. He sucked.
I have a very high bar for SKT players.
Okay.
All right. But the changes I've seen in him, the versatility as far as he literally did a red buff level 2 gank instantly. I was like,
That
oh
never
my
happens.
God, he's willing to do the super aggressive, like people always call them cheese when you're the one being the victim of it. But when you're doing it, it's
Intelligent pathing.
Intelligent pathing, exactly.
Clever use of
Anyways,
game mechanics.
those types of things. And he's also, people were criticizing him before for, not playing around Faker's aggressive playstyle and not complimenting his super strong laning, which we've seen him like dumpster people. But now Blank definitely is doing that. So.
Yeah. Either way, this is the closest that I've seen SKT to losing to KT. I think if they don't tilt off the face of the earth, I thought some SKT's drafts were kind of bad in game 1. I thought KT should have won the series. But you talked about pathing earlier. Kayn was a champion reveal. these are full-on first impressions. I actually just saw the champion reveal. I haven't been paying attention to the development cycle. What do you think of the kit?
I think it's really cool. First off, I mean, I like the idea. Like, so I am someone who gets nervous about new game mechanics coming into the game. You know, when talent flipping over walls, that's not going to work. You know, Rek'Sai burrowing over the walls, that's cheap. That's never going to work, right? But like, it seems like I will give credit to the design team where it seems like these things have fit in the game and feel relatively normal now. That said, walking off the map feels pretty crazy. Walking through walls feels pretty crazy. A lot of people are concerned about it and feel like it can't be balanced. My major concern is this champion seems so polarizing and like fits like such a different area that I feel like you have a champion like this that could either is going to be super, super OP and everyone plays him, or you reduce his stats and you make him so bad that the like walking off the map is fair and then no one wants to play him.
So first explain him a little bit for people who are like haven't caught up. Like he has to also like make a choice in the game for which style he wants.
And that augments his ability. So
be.
at a certain point in the game, after you've gotten like enough stacks, you get to be an assassin or a Darkin, basically. And it
it's
kind
like
of
Slayer or Assassin, essentially.
chooses the way you play. One will be a little bit more like bruisery, and the other one will be much more assassin-like. I'm a little skeptical of a lot of these things because I almost feel like we have, 134 champions now? Or 100?
It's 137 with Kayn, I think.
All right, 137
Something
champions.
like that,
and there's a lot of new stuff on this kit. So this one felt a little bit like, oh, we have people that parkour over walls. What if you can walk straight through a wall? Like, that'll be different, right? So there's a few things that I think fit with the kit, and I'll be down to play it if it's cool because it's a jungler, and most of the times these junglers become OP, so I'm going to have to learn it.
Yeah.
I didn't do it with Rek'Sai for the rest of my life.
For
this one, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I just need to see because it's something we haven't seen before.
And so just to explain, if you haven't seen the previews or anything, you guys can go check it out. But the E essentially is like, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a no clip, basically, where you can walk through the walls. You can literally walk off the map. If you are in combat, it doesn't last very long. And if you're off the map when it expires, you get snapped back to the closest place on the map, essentially, if you flash into a wall kind of thing. But otherwise, you can literally walk between walls. You can walk outside of a lane, behind the bushes, and then into the lane. You can do all this crazy stuff. And his R, you actually like essentially infest someone.
Yeah.
So if, for example, you're playing against a Shen and the Shen is ulting towards bot lane, you can ult into him and follow him to bot lane. Or if he's TPing, you can do those sorts of things. So like pretty crazy stuff. The E is mostly what people are talking about, though, how you can walk through walls and walk off the map.
Yeah.
This is a kit. Oh, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, he changes when he gets a kill. Was that the point that you have to make the decision, or what?
I just know it's later in the game. I actually don't know what triggers it. I haven't actually seen that, but I do know, like, my understanding is it's something that has to be like charged up. I don't know if it's either through kills or through dealing damage or through whatever. But there is a certain point that comes in the game when bits levels, maybe it's whatever, where you choose between the two forms. But you're going to be playing like a fair portion of the game as his like base form or whatever.
Yeah, I'll be a little surprised if, at least when I see in pro play, if we actually see an active difference between the two. A lot of times with these types of kits, you'll see one. I do think that at some point this guy will be in pro though. Looking at his,
it looks so cool.
Exactly. Every time there's kind of these unique mechanics, Rek'Sai would be an example with the tremor sense. That's an ability that pro players will absolutely be able to utilize. Being able to walk through walls or like flash into the middle of a team and then infest the carry to deal 40% of his damage. If this guy's remotely tuned to be balanced, I think pro teams find a use of him. The gank pass
following TPs and stuff is nuts too.
And all that other types of stuff. So I think absolutely this guy's going to be something we see a lot in pro.
All right, do you guys have concerns about, like, so you're in a world where you have two different forms. Like, to me, it feels like you may end up where one form is just always the form you take. You know, we generally land on pretty much a correct build path, pretty much the correct masteries, pretty much the correct runes, right? There are some different circumstances, but is that a concern for you guys with this champion where it's like, oh, like, so cool, you get to play these two different things. Oh, turns out one is always better than
I mean, it's definitely hard to pull off. I'm not concerned about it, even if, the majority of people are probably going to take the CC oriented one. Obviously, the goal, the design goal is to make one extremely, auto attack and basically like flimsy DPS role, and the other one is supposed to be more tanky, more CC oriented. I just think that it's not something that you really have to be worried about if one of them is generally considered weaker. I still think it's an interesting little thing to try and go for. I do think that it's extremely hard to balance and hit that, point where they're both equally perfectly viable or whatever. And it depends on what the game actually needs or whatever.
That would be really cool,
if your
though,
top
right?
lane Renekton is building, only, armor penetration and Blade of the Ruin King and stuff, and then you have to go the tanky route. And if he actually is building, I don't know.
I think it'd be really cool. By the way, we'll have to wait and see as Kayn kind of gets revealed more and if changes happen.
I'm gonna play it.
I know you wanted to talk a bit about Immortals and their new investment.
I did. There was one other piece of news. It wasn't like huge news or anything because Immortals already has a bunch of investors. But I thought this one was kind of interesting. AEG, which is basically the investment group that owns like LA Live and stuff, where we've had a bunch of events before already.
Right next to the Staples Center.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. In the announcement, there was one line that caught my eye that said, Staples Center will be the home of Immortals home games. And it got me thinking about stuff I'd heard in the past where a lot of the stadiums for like NBA teams and stuff, why a lot of them were starting to invest and a whole bunch of them started investing in esports now, was that eventually, talking like pretty far in the future, they wanted to get to this point where they could fill downtime. Basically, these stadiums are really expensive, but they have a lot of downtime because only, when there are games going on in them, do you actually get to, utilize them or whatever with esports events.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of like poke your guys' ideas and like see far out in the future, like, do you see this world where we get to a point where there's localized teams and localized, events very often for live stuff, and that's like the first step in China. Is kind of like they're getting towards that point with like the really big cities.
Yeah. So I think yes, it is possible at some point. One of the concerns that I have always had, like, so we know that esports for the big events, for like the World Finals, for TI, for these sorts of things, can fill big stadiums, can sell out crowds. One of my major concerns, as far as like day to day, week to week, selling out esports events is the live experience different enough from watching at home? Where, with sports, it's like you go to the stadium, you are watching the players, you're watching from a different angle, you're watching a different experience. Whereas, if I go to watch the International, like live in Seattle or whatever, right? I'm sitting there, I'm watching the same screen that I would be watching sitting at my couch, right? So that is a difference between esports and live sports. It's about the atmosphere, it's about the excitement of being there, right? And that is great. I'm just that is my hesitation with thinking that esports will be able to sell out big stadiums on a regular basis, because I'm not sure that the experience is different enough if you're doing it every week.
I personally have loved going to live events
Me too.
for the entire duration that I've been in esports at all. I also, though, have not consistently gone to them over and over and like had repetitive ones, because like I don't go to the same one over and over because I really do enjoy the feel and being there with people and seeing the players and stuff like that. But there definitely is that aspect of, I'm just trying to play some games and it's so convenient here to watch from my home and just be on my own computer.
It's a different experience, right? There's actually been a lot of people that I like run into at a movie theater or something, and they say, "Oh, are you Jad?" I'm like, "Absolutely," and it's in LA, and I say,
"Yes, I am."
Have you been to the LCS before? And a lot of them say no, and I'm like, it's right down the street. Like we are, 2 miles from it right now. Just go on a Sunday, but they still haven't. So I think a lot of people are almost skeptical of, will it actually be different than what I'm doing on my computer while watching it on a second screen? I think it is. When I've gone to them, it's been really enjoyable. The sense of community, the fact that you can share a lot of stories with other people, and the networking you do is just really cool. But there's a lot of people that are in LA that are big league fans who don't even come to the LCS.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is different, and I love going to BlizzCon and Worlds, and like these big events are amazing. I'm just not sure that every week would I go to Worlds every single week and watch the finals if it happened every week. I don't know, and that's a tough question. And I also think that's something that people can crack, because there's so many ways to like integrate live fans and integrate the live experience to make that different from the at-home viewing experience. And I think that's one of the key evolutions that esports needs to make, because if you make this a very different, very unique experience from watching at home, then people are more compelled to come up and show up every week and see that different experience.
Yeah, I don't think it's difficult to do either. I got to the point where when I was very young, I went to baseball games like the A's, super cheap tickets because they're in Oakland, and and now they would literally be like $15-$20 or something to go in the stands or whatever.
We used to go to Expos.
But I hated. I got to the point where I was just like, It's not really worth going there. I mean, it's only there worth going for me at that point, like if I was going with a bunch of friends or something.
Yep.
On top of that, baseball got really boring for me, and that's a whole different issue where I didn't really enjoy the sport anymore, but I think it's definitely doable.
All right, sweet. State of the meta. 7.13, it's coming.
Oh, baby.
Absolutely. What is your favorite thing about patch 7.2?
Kindred.
I'm sure. Oh, you.
I wanted
go
to ask
Kindred.
you a question.
I was gonna say, I feel like Jat has probably the exact same excitement that I do for this patch.
Ooh.
I was going to ask you about Shaco.
This is like one of those things.
Because I'm terrified of those Shaco changes.
Okay.
The Cinder Hulk thing is very exciting. We need to pick what we're going to start with. We're going to start with that.
Azale shouted first.
Okay.
So
I
you
did
go,
shout
sir.
first,
We're
so
gonna go.
there, Squeaky Wheel gets greased.
That's the rule of the
Kindred,
shoutcasters.
yeah, it is,
Go ahead.
it is. Kindred, I'm very excited. Kindred is getting some serious buffs. And this is like my most played champion in League, period. I love Kindred. I am very excited about all the buffs that Kindred is getting. Like it finally feels like this is maybe the patch that can bring they, her, whatever you want to call it back.
It's they.
Want me to read them out for you?
Bring
There's
them
two
back.
of them.
Bring them back.
Basic attacks gain 75 range at 4 stacks, plus 25 range every 3 stacks instead of 4. Wolf's Frenzy does instead of 0.5% of enemy current health, it does 1% of current health, which is the W. And then Mounting Dread gains 20 damage at all levels.
Yeah. So it's like the coolest thing about this champion has always been the hunt to me, like using your passive, marking people up, and feeling like if you're really effective and you are playing very intelligently, marking people very intelligently, then you can become this super powerful jungler, right? That has always been like the fantasy that is super fun about it for me. And for the longest time, ever since Kindred has been nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, it has just not felt like a real thing to me, because challenging for marks when you're just going to die when the other jungler shows up is a waste of time. So for the last long time, it's felt like the best way to play Kindred is simply farming your jungle and trying to scale up as this ADC basically. This actually feels like, hey, maybe these buffs are big enough that you can actually do the intended playstyle. Maybe if you show up at the Raptors and the other jungler's there, you don't just lose, right? Like, and that's what's super exciting for me. And I also think that's a very unique style of jungler that could be used in competitive too.
Yeah, you also got to work on Kindred about a year ago. Like, how did these compare to like the changes that happened back then?
So that was when it was the initial change with basically the bonus damage on Q and things like this. So there was like a lot of different things that we had talked about going through. That was when I was working on live gameplay during MSI in 2016.
Yeah.
And I got to work on some of the changes. And the scope of it was like such that it was a relatively smaller change. People had talked about a lot of stuff. Bonuses around the W was one thing that I thought would be really cool. And Joe Lansford, who was heading up those changes, and some of the guys thought it would be pretty cool too, but it's pretty large, right? So if you change gameplay mechanics, like I always think that the W is a really unique area. So if you get move speed in there, or you get range, or it gets bigger, or you get armor shredder, like all these things are very cool. But they're also scary changes to make, because when you make those sorts of gameplay impacting changes, it's really hard to tell where the champion will land. And that is one of the things that people are always nervous about with making changes, right? If you just add some numbers, you make it do more damage, then it's probably going to go up a little bit. But if you change something entirely, it's very scary. And that is maybe an area where Kindred could be in, because if you put her to a place where she can constantly challenge for bounties and now is a massively longer range jungler, then that is like something that could really change the power.
Thing for me is with the champion, I always felt like they did too much when they're good and in order to, yeah, exactly, and too little when they're bad, because her ultimate or their ultimate is so game changing for later stages of the game. So if you balance her to a point where, like you're saying, you don't have to run away from Raptors or whatever, and like you can skirmish with people and go toe to toe. And you're also scaling as a range champion for later. Plus, you have this ultimate that kind of changes the way team comps work.
Yeah.
Then it seems like a very tricky one to balance all those aspects, because you do kind of want all those parts of her kit. But I want to jump ahead to me and Jat's ones, because I was gonna say that Jat was gonna say Cinder Hulk, and then I was gonna bring out the
This
Shaco
is like one of those
one.
dating shows.
But
where
you brought out
the other one's gonna
Shaco
say.
Yeah, but I wanted to hear what you said about it, because I don't know Shaco as well as you do.
Yeah. So I was gonna do Shaco, but I thought the one you were immediately gonna go for is the Buy Me Cinder, because Cinder Hulk to me, I was just getting so excited. I saw one change and I was like, oh, cool. You know, they're going to lower the cost and I can just like get it earlier. That'll be great.
Mana.
And then I was like, oh, and more mana? Oh, that's really cool. And I was like, oh, and it does 50% more damage to the monsters now? Oh, and I was just freaking out. Because
you clear faster. You have more mana.
It's cheaper.
And then also when you complete your build, since the bonus health multiplier went from 15% to 20% on Cinderhulk, you're also just having as much health for 200 less gold. This is a pretty, I mean, we like tank junglers, so we're a little more excited for this than normal because there's still a chance that Elise Sin's going to come at you.
Nunu is not this exciting.
Nunu is this exciting.
If Nunu is at 56% now, after this, he's going to be 58. Like, he's actually going to go, I think he's going to go way up. This is already a buff Nunu.
Stop talking about Nunu now.
Tricky thing,
divert attention.
The tricky thing here is, I think for solo queue, all the tank junglers get like a 1 to 3% win rate buff. And I'm really excited about the ones that weren't necessarily at the top of viability, maybe being good now. You know, people that put training into Sejuani, I think Sejuani is better now. Just literally anything that has mana problems or clear problems, both of those things get multiplied. I think Jungle Maokai is going to be quite good.
The problem is that even if you don't have those problems, the ones you're talking about that are the peak tank junglers, basically, Zach and Nunu and stuff like that, are going to be pretty nutty. What do you want to go?
I was curious. So just like as tanks in general, it's making me think about some of the itemization changes. Like so, Abyssal Mask, right? Like that is being changed from a no mana item with a 10% like bonus damage type thing. Now it's being built out of Catalyst. Before we had oh God, what is it? Banner of Command went from a mana item to not a mana item. And like, what is your thoughts on this? Because I mean, I know not a lot of people play Mundo. I like playing Mundo, and I'm always kind of confused / annoyed by some of these changes because I'm like, oh, now this item works for me. Oh, now I can't build it ever. Because if you're playing a manaless champion and then they just put a ton of the item budget into mana or vice versa, they're changing it back and forth. It feels really bad for those kind of champions. And I know the intention is like, oh, not a lot of people are building it. Now it'll be even better for like your Maokai or things like this. But it kind of feels weird when items that work very well for a specific type of champion are now just like deleted from their
it's not deleted to me. So the example is like building Trinity Force on Yasuo or something like that, right?
But is Mundo ever going to build a new Abyssal Mask out of a Catalyst?
I mean, should he even be?
I've never built Abyssal Mask on anybody, so
yeah, he should. I think he's not. I think Mundo should have been going Visage.
Also,
well, you can go both.
Yeah.
And now you probably build like a.
What's your
try to think of what
regardless though, there is
a locket. You build a locket for your other MR item.
Regardless, there's always a point where you're willing to give up X amount of gold efficiency for mana, and oftentimes the ones where they're stuffing mana into items are extra efficient, and like they don't really budget that amount of gold at the same power level that they do other stats. Yasuo on Trinity Force, it was actually like decently common. His cooldown reduction doesn't even do anything much for him at all either. So like those are 2 stats in addition to the mana that didn't really care about.
I do hear you though on that one. Like Abyssal Mask is a little weird. Now I don't like it when there's so many.
This is a massive change. I don't know.
Like,
if you've seen it.
I didn't even. I've never bought it and I haven't seen it.
Well, literally, it now has mana. It didn't. It built out of like a bunch of MR. It had, like they changed
and
almost everything about the item.
So the whole paradigm is like trade. You lose health, you get mana back, right? So much of the power is in that. So it's kind of gone. I guess that's neither here nor there. It is kind of just a little bit weird to me when items keep getting consistently changed that much.
This is a bit of an add-on. Righteous Glory, I think, is super good.
Yeah,
right now, especially after
everybody agrees with that.
Yeah, just wanted to throw it out there since we're talking about solo queue a lot. I just capping off the Cinderhulk thing. I don't know if that will be a pro play impacting thing because even if you're allowing the mana regen and the Cinderhulk to clear faster, Elise Sin's still going to be able to go Tracker's Knife Double Longsword and duel you before you hit the items.
Gragas is still already in there though. Zach is already in there, right?
100% all aboard this Cinderhulk train. I think we are going straight to the moon with this sucker. The tanks are back. Remember the old age of Cinderhulk? There was we had
I got mastered during that time. It was great.
Yeah, we had a long
now
period.
We're going to Rift
Rivals
and we can't
tanks
play.
Weren't dead, right? Tanks were already in competitive. This will just make them better, and maybe it will bring more.
Anyways, something that's not a tank that I do think massive buffs came up is the Shaco. You're correct, Jat. I am super excited about this.
You can talk excited. I want to talk worry first. And then you can
go
talk
ahead.
excitement.
You can do the other people's perspective.
All right. Shaco, this is the context. I'm going to constantly say Shaco and Shaco just because
just stick with Shaco. You're on a roll, buddy.
Shaco's correct?
Yeah.
Shaco isn't getting to live out his assassin fantasy. Even just that line. The number of Shacos that have one.
You did that on purpose.
He's trolling.
You did that on purpose.
The number of Shaco's that I already see one-shotting carries in the late game is every other one. It
Are
seems to
these
happen almost every
15
game.
and 0 Shakos or?
Sometimes it's just to have a lot of farm where they're like 6 kills. I feel like he already has the assassin fantasy.
And Dustblade Rush
like
was the highest win rate item, to be fair. So it's like I feel like a lot of people are already building him assassin. When I played him, that's how I would build him.
I am in there with this new change. Are you done with your worries or?
I just thought he was already good.
Yeah, you thought he was already good. So to be fair, they are taking the damage ratio and changing it to total, or I mean bonus from total. But they're also compensating in base damage for that, so it's gonna be great.
So no more Sunfire.
Biggest thing to me is that they're changing it from magic damage to physical damage, which was always one of my biggest pet peeves. I was like, I mean, like the armor penetration feels pretty good, but if one of my main damaging abilities is magic damage, it feels pretty bad. Now I'm all in there. Serrated Dirks all over the place. I'm getting every single one. I am so excited for this change to Shaco. I think that he is absolutely going to be a very strong assassin. Plus the fact that the way I think that you should be jungling right now is very gank heavy. And Shaco loves gank heavy metas. He's so good at getting off early ganks because you just box clear early. You don't even have to take any armor runes or anything like that. You can be super greedy early on. Just rely all on boxes and then just gank, 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 gank. By that time, you've got all this armor penetration coming through, and I feel like just looking at these numbers, these are very big numbers to me. Just in my years of playing League of Legends, a 1.2 ratio for even just bonus attack damage on that low of a cooldown feels so good.
What do you guys think about the fact that like AP Shakos? Like, so I've actually seen a lot of people super negative. Oh,
I don't like AP
that was not PG-13.
I didn't say anything.
So I mean, you may not like it, but I've seen some very unhappy people who are AP Shako type players because Twin Shiv is essentially that's like your big burst, right? With AP, yes, you have boxes and your burst from the clone exploding, etc. I know, but AP Shako dead.
I
good riddance. I honestly
probably just based on the damage change.
Based on the way that they've been changing all champions, they've been trying to do away with the versatility of being able to build a champion full AP and full AD and having them be viable, which to me was always sad because I loved it, when Tristana had the option of going Deathfire Grasp and like full AP, and it was hilarious to me, jumping in there and stuff like that. But I can see why they're doing those types of changes and going that way. I do really love hybrid and having more choices with your build paths because I don't like it that so many champions have basically been filtered down to this is your build path. There's like a couple of optimizations you can make depending on what team you're playing against. But for the most part, there is a best build for quite a lot of champions. And you just follow.
Yeah, we probably should move on for patch pretty soon. But one thing, the last thing I wanted to touch on.
Patch, actually. Getting through it.
The last thing I wanted to touch on really quick was Gnar. I'm actually pretty concerned about the Gnar changes because although we already have been starting to see it in pro play, EU LCS, we saw it in the SKT KT series. I've been seeing a lot of pros spamming Gnar in solo queue, and now he just got some pretty fat buffs. People were playing it before the buffs were even announced, right? Like Boomerang gets essentially 10 more damage on every level up. Like this is something that's pretty
40 on max.
Yeah. So it's like this is something that's pretty spammable. Plus your Mega Gnar engage is now larger. You have 125 extra range. I think that is
it's a big range increase.
Like that is a big one in and of itself. But Gnar is like always at this place where it's like, okay, he's pretty lane dominant in mini. Like they buffed his HP regen in mini a while ago. And this is something that like the Q is so spammable. When you do a Black Cleaver rush and you have some CDR, essentially every time you catch that, you're just throwing it out again.
Yep.
So you're adding by level 9, essentially 40 damage on something that is a spammable skill that goes through minions and hits champions. Like that sounds very oppressive to me on someone who's already borderline really hard to lane against for most champions. So like I'm pretty concerned that Gnar could just get pushed back to like the old days where it's the only top lane champion almost.
I want to keep this quick and I won't add anything on your Gnar thing. I do agree with it. I also think that Rek'Sai is getting excessive buffs because Rek'Sai in the same patch is also getting more attack damage on her ultimate. So it's same scenario. I already thought she was good. Yeah. She's going to get better, but we should.
Sensing a theme with this patch. So the Gnar one I think is absolutely right back in meta, but all the like scary changes we've talked about have been junglers. So I'm really wondering how are they going to compete with each other? Because I know junglers were pretty OP at the start of 2017. It might come back to that a little bit with this patch because you have the Cinderhulk guys that are already getting banned and could be crazy. But now you're also, if Kindred changes actually make them in meta, and if the Rek'Sai changes, I think the Warrior Black Cleaver build can be insane. There's a lot of really, really powerful junglers, which balances the role amongst themselves, but I think it makes the jungler influence extremely high.
Yeah, and I kind of see a problem with the way that they're doing it because they nerfed jungle by nerfing the actual jungle, and now they're buffing the actual champions. So they're just going to be these extreme champions, yet still, having this gank-heavy jungler meta is going to make people who don't play jungle feel more frustrated. People already feel the most frustrated because, junglers feel unfair or whatever to laners and when they're getting ganked. So I feel like this might add to that.
Yeah. That'll do with the patch, but I did want to touch on solo queue recently. I'll start with you guys because I got a good story after this, but I want to save it for a bit. How's your solo queue been going?
Pretty well. I've been still just playing like a lot of carry top laners and stuff. I've actually been playing a fair bit of Malzahar top, which sounds kind of weird probably, but like I've always liked Malzahar. I played him pre-rework, I played him post-rework, and even after the nerfs, I still think this champion is actually super cheap. I think he's cheap mid lane. I actually think he's so overpowered that you can play him top lane and actually be super effective. Like it just feels like when I'm playing Malzahar, even top lane. So your early levels, you're scared of getting all in, but once you have literally just a lost chapter, it feels like you have such heavy push that no one can even approach you. Like they're always under their turret. And post level 6, if you hit them with a Q or two or they get bounced a couple times, you just ult them under their turret and you kill them. It's like, it feels unfair. Like it's actually pretty disgusting.
Fair enough. Am I next?
Yeah.
It's about to be a lot better. I'm about to be.
Once Cinderhulk comes in, is that it?
Well, that's like right now, right? Are they doing it
today?
tonight?
It's right now.
Yeah. Or is it on right
We're
now?
doing Wednesday morning.
Wednesday's
the patch came out last night.
Yeah. Okay, I'm about to play some games. I'm literally going to play
this.
some games like tonight and be very, very excited because I'm going to try out Shaco. I'm going to try out Cinderhulk on my favorite tanks, and both of them are going to be strong.
Yeah. So speaking of things that people think is strong, Kayle Yi is a strategy that has been getting a little bit of buzz. I want to work this in with the tweet we got. Brock Gilmer said last week, could you ever see a meta where support is in a different lane? And that's kind of what this is. So for some context, there was a Reddit thread and there was a YouTube video that talked about some elo boosting strategy where a Kayle top would go wind speakers, rush an Ardent Sensor, and then a jungle Yi, once they have their Devour, would basically run top and you turret dive the dude at level 6 and you snowball the game. When you check the analytics sites like Lolalytics, you'll see like 3% of people build Ardent Sensor on Kayle and it's got a 60% win rate. So you think, ooh, yeah, that's awesome. It's going to crush. A lot of items actually have a 60% win rate on Lolalytics. I tried this a few times. Not as good as you would think. For a couple
to be clear,
of
I didn't think it
reasons.
was good in the first place.
Yeah.
We can get into more of that later,
Okay,
but go ahead.
So the reason why I think it could be good, and this is why I wanted to get back to the question of if you could see a meta where a support is in a different lane. Back on Dignitas 5 years ago, me and Scar would do this Kassadin Udyr thing where Udyr would take mid lane once Kassadin was 6, and then Kassadin would go gank other people. And the idea there was Kassadin's a better ganker than Udyr, and Udyr can still shove, and then you both get farmed because you're doing your roles efficiently.
Yep.
And the same way in this, it's like, well, as long as the Yi is getting all the jungle farm and the top lane farm, why not multiply your stats on Yi for effectiveness? In theory, that works, I think, but in practice, it doesn't, because if anyone 2v2s you at any point before level 9, you just get smashed.
Yeah, that's what I was
That's
saying.
literally all
I think what works is
all
that
it
you're boosting people, so you have boosters playing.
That is the other factor
People
that works into it.
Like people are like, oh my god! Like even in the video, so I see this video, I look it up, I'm like, okay, kind of cool, and they're like, this is unbelievable win rate, and the guy has like an 80% win rate or whatever it was, 83,
He's
84,
a master
something
player
like that.
in gold.
And it's two masters player. First off, they're dueling, so it's like two masters players, and they're in D5, and I'm like. Last season, playing with my girlfriend and stuff when I was playing and some of her friends and some of my other friends and stuff, like doing it to the same elo, like my Smurf was in Diamond 5 elo, I had a better win rate than that playing with my friends on Kayle. So I'm just like, you could take any two Masters players and you put them in that sort of elo, doing jungle mid, doing anything, and they will probably have that good of a win rate or better, right? Like, I think it's a very cool idea and it's a cool strategy, but like, why not just build Kayle normally and then lane together?
No, that would actually be better because I did it a few times and I started ganking top early. We got like a couple kills and it's like, why are we not just hyper carrying on Kayle?
Yeah.
This would be so much easier. Kayle is a good hyper carry. I do like the excitement it brings though.
It's cool.
So I had a tweet where the Kayle was
sucks.
060 and the Yi was 060. Funny story about that. There was a
Was
Kayle,
it you?
Yeah, it was me. There was a Kayle in my game. I'm down to try anything. Like I'm super enthusiastic about new strategies.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
And it's just this random guy. He's like, Jungle, do you play Yi? I'm a Kayle main. And I'm like, yeah, I play Yi. I'm the best at it.
So you did play a bunch of we had a show match or whatever.
I used to play a lot of Yi.
Anyways,
Like it's a champion I used to be good at. I just haven't played it in a while. But anyway, he's like, I'm a Kayle main. We got this. And he's like, do you know what you're doing? I'm like, absolutely, I know what I'm doing. I did not know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But they had Riven Xin Zhao, and this guy didn't play passive enough in lane. He started with double fairy charm, and then he started pushing in Riven. So like Xin killed him. Then they moved into my jungle. They killed me, and they pretty much just cycled that the whole game. And that's what you can do again.
The first thing that came to mind when you guys told me this morning, and I was like, wait, what? Well, the second thing. First thing that came to my mind was boosters. That's why. Second thing that came to my mind was, okay, the only dude who actually needs to know what they're doing is the Kayle, because the biggest thing with Yi is when he goes in with his ultimate, he's able to alpha strike to avoid a large amount of abilities, like right at the beginning. His problem is right after his alpha strike ends, that's when people usually hit him. So I was like, okay, then you have the Kayle ultimate, and that will buy him enough time for his second alpha strike because he's getting off auto attacks during the first one. So I was like, okay, I can kind of see the synergy between the two champions at least, but. As you said, why would you go this
even like I play a lot of Kayle. Like he was one of my most played last season. I've played him a lot this season in ranked and stuff. Like I like Kayle a lot. I used to play Kayle jungle even. But anyway, top lane, even doing a real build with like Nashers and stuff, when you're way ahead in CS, you're still super vulnerable to getting ganked because the way that you abuse people on Kayle is by pushing them in, is by harassing them under turret. That's how you get big CS advantages and stuff. So it's like, why not just do that build instead of having heal and Ardent Sensor and just getting slammed?
Yeah. I want to conclude this discussion a little bit. I do think you can succeed with it, but the Kayle has to be extremely passive, and the Yi has to jungle like normal until he gets his items. Because if you just let your other lanes get screwed, and to answer the question, could you ever see a meta where support is in a different lane? Yes, as long as the support can be lane dominant. If you're doing the double fairy charm, no, that's actually never going to be competitively viable.
All right, let's get to the teams then. North American LCS. Let's go. Who are we starting with?
Immortals. Number one.
Perfect.
Start with the best. They are the best.
Are they the real deal, though?
Yes, I think so. I think at this point you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Will they be first by the end of the split? Like that's TBD, right? We don't know. I would not be shocked if they were. I would not be shocked if they weren't. But they have beat all the good teams now.
And the way that they did it, they ended this last week with Smithy making highlight plays. Flame making highlight plays. Like the individual players are playing so much better as well that you have to say they're real deal, at least right now.
And it's not cheese picks or anything. They play good macro games. Their vision control is good. Like they just look like a good League of Legends team.
That's a really good, you reminded me, I wanted to bring up, I think that the coach deserves so much more credit. Yeah, Song, who was recently added, because when I was talking to Bo Belter, in the same breath when I was talking about, personnel changes, he was like, Song was a very important change for us as well, and he has helped out a lot. And the things that you're talking about with, their macro game and, like their decisiveness in game, a decent amount of that credit also has to be given to him, not just to the, Smithy's a nice guy and he has good game knowledge in game.
Yeah, I also want to put my skeptic hat on a little bit because I think in most splits we have teams that jump out to like X and 1 records.
But it doesn't feel like FlyQuest last split.
It does not feel like FlyQuest last split. It feels more to me like Gravity from a few splits back. So all of these players coming into the split were and are known quantities. So I absolutely think they deserve to be where they are, and they have been outperforming and they've been winning all these games. But I don't think they will be number one at the end of the split. I think they're absolutely going to be contending for that, and they're no longer like a non-playoff team.
Are you talking standings or are you talking like winning the finals?
Both.
Okay.
In a sense, I don't think they'll get the number 1 seed. I don't think they'll win NA LCS, only because all these players have been around for so long. We're doing the predictions right now.
I can see it in his eyes.
Turn the chant, Jack.
No, I actually think I think it's the same competition we've had. It's TSM, C9, and COG are the top 3 in the conversation. And it could very well be Immortals, but I don't want to say like, hey, because they've beaten all these teams, the first time around, that they are now the overwhelming favorites for the split, mainly because the players, even though they've had highlight moments, like I don't think they have the highest talent level in the league. So they have to then beat everyone on team play, and I think the cohesion can come together for some of these other teams to start competing with Immortals later down in the season.
And they are playing TSM this week, I do believe. So we're going to get,
Oh, we have a lot of, pretty much all the top teams are playing each other.
Yeah.
This is going to be a hype week.
It's been pretty crazy. Last week was pretty insane as well for Dig, who fell pretty short. That's another team that they went 0-2 against some really tough competition, Immortals and C9. And Immortals obviously took down CLG and Dig, who were both 5-1 going into that week. So there's a lot of hype around them. TSM, Double said they're going to be the best by the end of split. They are now having a chance to kind of, I think, put a damper on the Immortals hype. I think if Immortals beats TSM this week, the Immortals hype goes into overdrive and probably will stay like that for a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, if TSM beats them, even if they're still above TSM in the standings, everyone's going to be like, back to normal. TSM's the best.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a super exciting weekend with those matchups. Other teams we want to talk about is P1 with their
P1?
one win. P1.
Going to Rift Rivals?
They did win a game, and we were so ready to anoint Mike Young like chief of the jungle.
Freak was the rebirth of P1. They
after
literally,
game, they're going to be a playoff team. Like
5 minutes after their first series with him, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, chill out there, Freak.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Young has looked good in some games, but he's also looked not so good in some other games. Like he's a super green jungler out of solo queue, and they protecting him a lot. The fact that they did lose to Liquid, what are they going to do, right? Going into Rift Rivals, in 2017, they're on their third jungler and fourth support. They have been making so many changes, and every time it doesn't work, they're just cycling it through again, but it seems like they're actually on a downward trajectory.
So for me, I actually have some faith in the players. I have little to no faith in the management / whatever is happening there. Like I'm starting to question that because it felt like, at least from the outside, right? Like I don't have all the inside info. We got the letter from the owner. He was writing and giving some explanations, but it's like, it felt like Stunt and Medios was working. Got rid of Stunt. Felt like, like
the Medios thing, to be fair, like he has been said so many times, he's like, I'm not committing.
I know.
I'm not going to.
But even just Stunt, right? The record with Stunt was great. They moved him out. Then they brought in Shady, who they thought they were doing better with, and then he said, "Oh, well, it turned out teams just hadn't adapted to Shady. Once they did, oops, I guess maybe we should have kept Stunt." Right? It feels like all these changes, when changes are coming rapid fire like that, it makes you think that the team does not know what they are doing, even if they do have sound logic behind it. It's hard to understand all that from the outside. And as far as hopes at Rift Rivals, I have pretty much none. I mean, like, they're not good in NA. Yes, there's obviously a chance. Like, these are some talented players. Could they, maybe pop off and carry a game? Like, could Arrow have some nuts game and beat someone? Yeah, I think it's possible. But, like, I think everyone solidly has them as the worst team going to Rift Rivals from either region. And I think that there should be no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I forget if I mentioned at the start of the episode, but we're going to do a separate Rift Rivals episode, which will come out before Rift Rivals.
Yeah.
So we can talk about all of our Phoenix One hopes and dreams then.
That we don't have.
Yeah, anything else on Phoenix One?
FlyQuest.
No.
All right, another team. Man, we have negative view on the teams right here. FlyQuest is another team that hasn't been doing so great. They are tied for last with Phoenix One, so the third and fourth place teams from last split are now tied for last. The question we are asking here is, how did they drop so hard from summer in the first half of? How did they drop so hard from spring in the first half of summer?
I mean, the thing is, so I was thinking, hey, a Wild Turtle should be maybe an upgrade over Alltech. Maybe he'll fit well with their playstyle. These are guys who know each other. Maybe they'll be able to do well. But it really does just feel like the wheels have fallen off. And it makes some sense. Like, they did pretty well in playoffs, but when you look back to regular season, they're on something like a 9-30 run now in regular season. Like that is brutal, right? And this has been going since about halfway through spring split. So this team has actually been really struggling for a long time, but it's easy to forget that because they were in playoffs. They were in the third place match.
And it's because they bounced back in playoffs.
Yeah.
Right? So we can string together this regular season run of ineffectiveness, but they beat CLG in a reverse sweep, who maybe was in a downward spiral then, and that kind of influences that. And then they had a close game against Phoenix One, because Phoenix One actually was never that good on stage with Shady, ever. That dude was like 5-14 all-time on stage. So I think some of that can kind of be explained, and then maybe you explain away their success at the start of spring because Moon and High were actually playing really well, and their drafts, I thought, were spectacular as far as how they're carrying them there. And their drafts are pretty uninspired so far this split.
One thing maybe going for them is if we think that relative jungle strength is going up, if Moon can start taking over some games, because they did have a lot of success when Moon was super dominant in the jungle. So maybe if just the relative strength of junglers is going up, maybe they can have
Kobe
was number one fan of Moon Shaco, but I mean maybe there's some way, but like for now, I'm not expecting them to come back. You know, they obviously have some problems. They do have close games. They do get leads, but they don't seem to be able to solve their mid game problems. They don't seem to be able to solve their late game problems, and we're pretty far into the split. So they're going to need some major changes to get anything done. But talking about the league as a whole, do we think that like parity? We've talked about this a lot. Like so, Dignitas they went 0-2. Are they now like still in that top 5 that everyone was talking about? There's Immortals, TSM, CLG, C9, and Dig. So you still think that it's solidly top 5? And how close is that? And do you think that's going to spread out, by the end of the year? Like, is Dignitas still going to be up there? Is Immortals still going to be up there? Or are we just back to square one where it's 3 teams and the rest?
For me, those are going to stay the top 5. The order can definitely switch around, and there definitely are some ones I think are going to be on the bottom side.
Can anyone break into that top 5?
I would, but yeah. Well, break into it?
Yeah. Well,
I'm not feeling like Envy or any of those teams, actually.
It's kind of a question of, are we tiered or do we have a lot of parity? Or we just have like 2 groups, a top group and a bottom group, who then switch games with each other? I'm more leaning towards the second half of that definition, only because Echo Fox and Envy keep disappointing me. Because I feel like they should technically have the pieces to be able to pull it together. Did either of you guys see that Seraph tweet this past week? He tweeted after Niski played 2 games with them, "So nice to have a good mid laner."
Oh, we already knew that he really
liked Niski, but I thought Pyrian was doing.
Yeah,
I'm a Pyrian fan, man.
I know you wanted to put him in there.
It also just feels like, to me, that is not someone you want on your team. Like
Seraph has done this multiple
someone
times.
Who's going to do that and take a shot at a teammate, like especially kicking the guy while he's down. It's not like he's on another team. He's literally already been put in the sub role, and you're like, yeah, fuck that guy. He sucks. Like,
maybe some of it was at Ninja, but even then, it's like, what's the point?
Seraph has a long history of that, so it's not like surprising.
Then I mean, compliment, like to me, I just take issue with that. Compliment the person. Like if he wants to talk up Niski, great. Talk about love playing with Niski so far. Think he's been a great addition to the team. Really like playing with him. Great work. Whatever, great. But you don't need to kick the person while they're down. I never like that.
Well, to be fair, all he did say is, "So nice to have a good mid lane."
Yeah, but I mean, after the interview,
he's saying he's great.
I mean, he's also said this stuff with a jungler. Oh, it's really nice playing with a jungler that has a brain and all this stuff. Like,
it's literally the exact same
and he's
thing.
called Laud awful. Like, he's done a lot of stuff with everyone who's been out the door.
I hate that.
But it's just like Jad. I remember last time, Jad was like, "Oh, finally I get to cast with a good, color cast for my try cast." Yeah.
Oh, last week when I was casting.
Yeah, when Freak was here, you should have heard what he was saying. He's like, finally get a guy.
Yeah.
Finally get someone who's not
someone who doesn't bring their laptop to the show, like all these things.
Yeah. So I definitely agree, and I think that there is. I'm drawing the line as far as top 5.
Immortals, TSM, COG, C9, Dig line.
Yeah, I think there is a line. And I think I have more faith in Team Dignitas than you guys. Maybe in the last story meeting, you guys are talking about. I just remembered this. Them not really. Using split pushing well, or
that was probably about CLG with Darshan.
No, you were definitely talking about Dignitas because you were talking about them playing better when somebody's on tanks.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
But for me, I feel like there's a difference between which games we actually casted. Because I casted games in week 1 and 2 for Team Dignitas, and they literally split pushed every game with Fiora and
some days a nasty
Lucian
Fiora
and stuff like that.
League.
And I think it was an instance of, yes, they did fail a couple of times recently. But I do think that's a very viable strategy for them as well. It definitely is a concern, like the consistency for this team. And that's why I think they're on the lower half of the bottom 5. But I do think they have that versatility to play both styles.
Yeah.
And I do have a decent amount of faith in that team to at least stay in the top 5 thing. And I think they're within the line.
Yeah. Biggest concerns I have about these guys is, who is their actual roster? Shrimp and Chaser have been swapped around. Shrimp looked bad last week. Their bottom lane could be getting completely swapped out. So there's a lot of volatility with that team. And then for all their talk about the process of communication and the English lessons and how their communication is so better. I was watching the C9 versus Dig match highlights on the LoL Esports YouTube page, and sometimes for people that get their highlights elsewhere, I love LoL event pods and stuff, but I watch these for the player comms because during fights, you'll get to hear what the players are saying. There was a fight in C9 Dig where I could not understand a word. Everyone was shouting.
Ooh.
And it did not sound like they were playing in English. For everything they say about only playing in English, they did not sound that way. So I still think they're not there yet, and that could have some big problems down the line.
Roster changes always concern me a bit too, because even if the results aren't necessarily showing on stage yet, it kind of speaks of a lack of confidence to what's going on in scrims, right? Like if you're smashing everybody in scrims and you're winning on stage, you don't just randomly start swapping out players. So, maybe there are some other issues going on. Either way, we'll see. We got some Twitter questions that I think we're gonna hit.
You telling me Chaser is not the blank to
Maybe he is. Who knows? Maybe this new Kobe 24 is going to come in with the new changes.
Young upstart.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to it then.
All right. So first question we got: what would make the Cloud/Water Dragons more effective? The Ocean or Cloud Dragons?
Yeah. This is under the assumption that Mountain and Infernal are fine. I feel like Mountain is a win more Drake, but specifically these ones, I think one thing that would make Cloud more attractive is if it didn't kill you more than every other Drake early game. We have all these stats about the Drake not being that attractive. I'm a little worried about taking it. The other thing that I like to see is every single Drake, this is just a personal opinion, has the same effectiveness that just gets added on top every type of Drake. The main knock against Cloud Drake is that it doesn't help you in combat because in combat move speed is actually busted. But I feel like if you're getting 2 or 3 Cloud Drakes, I wouldn't mind seeing some actual in combat movement speed or some unique modifier as you get more of these Drakes.
Kobe's just disagreeing more and more.
That is a very powerful stat.
It would make it more attractive.
It would make it way more
attractive. Convert it to in combat move speed, but you get like 5 in combat move speed for the second one.
So, just based off your reaction, you obviously think that's crazy, but is that more crazy than Infernal? Is that more crazy than triple Infernal if you get some, in combat move speed?
Well, it obviously depends on what the number is. If you're literally just like, all right, you got 3. Now it's also in combat. You have plus 45 move speed. Then,
you wouldn't just convert it. You wouldn't just say, "Oh, once you have 3, it's all the time."
What if you get 1/3 of it? In combat,
and that comes down to balance, and that's something that the numbers you can try and adjust around to have a similar value to what you would expect the 6% or what else to come out to.
Yeah. What about Water Drake?
In principle, I think that it makes
Ocean.
sense.
Ocean also you could do the in combat thing if you really wanted to, because that's the same drawback that it has.
One thing that people talk about a lot is like CDR, stuff like that is not necessarily added through some of the dragons.
There's so much CDR on items.
Yeah,
now.
I mean it's something that people talk about, as far as like being able to make some of these more attractive, right? But I'm personally I'm probably more hyped on Ocean than most people are. Like I always feel super good about getting this dragon. I don't know how you guys feel. Like obviously I feel the best if I have 3 Infernals or something, but like I appreciate Ocean and I notice it a lot. I'm really big on regen, and even just for mana and stuff. Like
I like them all right now.
I wouldn't change Ocean. I just feel like Ocean Drake sometimes is not attractive because I feel like it's more conditionally effective than any other Drake. Swain, Sonas, Sorakas, like Anivia, certain champions just absolutely excel with
Siege
Ocean.
comps. I think are incredible with it because you can stay forever.
Also, later in the game, I tend to lose interest in the Ocean Drakes, especially if you're stacking them. And once you have one or once you have 2, if another one pops up and it's already so late in the game and you already have 2, you don't notice the difference at all moving from 2 to 3.
We did see, I think it was the C9 Dig series though this past weekend where I want to say it was double Ocean or a triple Ocean or something, and it was actually used very well by Dig. I'm thinking of the right game. Might have been a different one. I just remember Contracts. They used it around Baron where they essentially start a Baron bite, start a fight. Contracts gets very low, spends his Olaf ultimate, has to back off, and then the other team essentially just keeps threatening Baron, but staying around there. They regen back up with Ocean. Contracts can't engage. He's like 20% still on his Olaf and stuff, and they get a Baron off of that because they can't challenge for the Smite fight. Then they are able to essentially use this kind of never-ending push with the triple Oceans and sieging and Caitlyn and stuff. So like there are situations where it can be really strong, but I think it's kind of cool when you see teams playing properly around it.
Yeah. Final Twitter question that I kind of want to throw in here. If the split ended today, this is from Mon Slathma or Hugh. Mon Slathma, I'm going to go with him. His name is Janice with the first name Hugh. So I'm not going to say that consecutively.
Okay.
If the split ended today, who would win MVP? I'd say either Xmithy or Jensen was the tweet.
You got to give one vote.
Yeah, you get one vote.
Lock it in. Who is it?
I did not say. I was reading the tweet. I would not say Xmithy or Jensen.
Who would
split
you
ended
say?
today. I'd actually give
the red.
I'd give it to Jensen.
Okay.
Yeah, I got tricked by his
Jensen, and you get 2 seconds. Why? Give me a point. Give me a point. Why?
because he's been more dominant in his role than any other player this split. And the team also has found moderate success.
Yeah. For me, I would probably go with the Smithy argument of, how much he's changed the team. And as much as I'm like, oh yeah, you want to give so much credit to Song and everything else, like he is a very big and key part of the improvements of this team. And even if you're going to say they're not still going to be number one, huge jump from last split to even be like dead. Or everyone's like solid, top 3 team, top 4 team.
And what if they are
for
number
sure?
One, right?
And yeah, they do have the possibility to stay up there. I just think that the playmaking and also, I guess I'm also buying this with like the improvements from him, from last one. So I don't know. They're definitely. I think those are 2 really good candidates.
Yeah, I think either of those are totally fair. I also think that there is some possibility for some supports and stuff to maybe get it.
Yep.
I think that like with playmaking supports, they can maybe get it. But if it was today, I think I would be voting for Smithy because of how well the team is doing, how well he is doing, the improvements that he's brought to the team. People talk about his shot calling, but also just like individual mechanical plays that are extremely impressive. Multiple ones just this last weekend on Gragas, predictive, like the predictive ultimate, but also like because that was so sick, people forget about his top lane gank where he goes for the body slam, waits for somebody to flash, then reactively flashes his body slam onto him. Like that was also sick. Like he's playing so well mechanically. He's making a big difference for the team. So he would be my vote today. But if C9 ends up near the top of the table at the end of the split and Jensen keeps up this level of lane dominance, he could easily be MVP.
Also, the thing that's always interesting for me for MVP is like it's regular split season. And me, the one thing I'm always worried about with Jensen is once you get past regular season.
But the season is great.
Exactly. The regular season, I'm like, he's going to smash everybody. He is going to, be the lane dominant dude. Once you get to like the high pressure, maybe we'll see it at Rift Rivals come out or something. How is he going to deal with pressure?
Sweet. As a reminder, we will have a Rift Rivals episode coming out before Rift Rivals, so sometime early next week. That will do it for this episode 13 of The Dive. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoy sitting around and talking about it. Isaac wants to make a point. Loves what makes a point.
NA LCS Friday. Remember, tune in then. We'll see you there.
Yeah, keep tweeting us as well.
Yeah.